Okay, welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast. Chris Turnbull, thank you very much. It's been a bit of a last minute arrangement this, but we appreciate you taking the time to come and see us.
My pleasure, yes. I look forward to giving you what knowledge I have on this matter, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, if you have been living under a rock, you have to have been living under a rock for the past year basically that this has come about. If you don't know about the latest licensing for short-term lets, which has been introduced by the Scottish Government in Scotland for any kind of serviced accommodation, these are the kind of words that you'll hear about the property industry. Let's just talk about the kind of words that we hear. So it's the serviced apartments, serviced accommodation. Some people call it Airbnbs. Some people call it
holiday lets,
self-catering, all that.
And it just summarises, I suppose, as short-term lets.
Short-term lets.
That's what the licence is going to be all about, yes.
Yeah, so for the purpose of this podcast, we'll just call them short-term lets. I think that's probably the easiest thing.
Makes sense, yes.
And to put content in it, the licence application has to be applied by Sunday, which from the day of recording is like 5 days away. So we thought we'd
That's right, yes. It's a very tight timescale from this podcast. So I think it's midnight on the, let's just say the 30th to be safe. Yeah.
We're recording this on Tuesday the 26th. Mm-hmm. And the plan is that if the guys will be able to do it, get us this turned around and get it out on Friday, which is a couple of days before the deadline. Because I just think, and talking to you as well, Chris, that there's so many people out there that have just buried their head in the sand with all this sort of stuff, hoping that it's going to go away, and that they think that come the 1st of October, they're still going to be able to trade, and still rent their apartments out and stuff like that. But
yeah, I mean, that's exactly how I see it. I see come the 1st of October, people are going to be saying, "What, I need a license? Nobody told me that." And that's the whole irony of that this has been flagged for so long, and really, as we get close to this deadline, that's when a lot of people are really starting to actually act, and it doesn't leave much time. Yeah. Yes,
because you've been really good in posting on the group, on the Facebook group, and that's how you came to my attention, sort of keeping people updated and all that. And you've reached out and said, if anybody wants any advice, then just reach out. Because it's quite difficult to get. There's not really anywhere where you can go where you can actually speak to somebody who'll give you exact information. And we thought it'd be useful to bring you in to just explain the process from first hand, what you've experienced, because you've got a short-term let in Edinburgh and one in Glasgow, is that right?
Yeah, the whole thing about it is, obviously this has been brought in by the Scottish Government, but they've devolved it to the 32 local authorities, and each local authority has interpreted it differently, and therefore there is different things that people need to do in the different authorities to actually comply. So yeah, the experience in Edinburgh is different because it's what they call a control zone, and therefore in Edinburgh people need to have applied for planning or to have a certificate of lawfulness application in before they put their licence application in.
There's two separate things here, just so people are aware, right? You've got the licence application, which is basically a council document, and then planning permission, which is, I think now planning is, you go on the Scottish Government website, is that right?
That's right, yeah. So on the Scottish Government e-planning portal to actually go decide which way you want to go. I think personally the certificate of lawfulness is the route that is far better for people. And
we'll talk about that in a minute, right? What the differences are and what exactly a certificate of lawfulness is.
Is the plan application almost like a commercial change of use for changing the use of that property to a short-term rental?
Well, this is where a lot of the problems lie. The use of this control zone in Edinburgh, it's all about suggesting that there has been a material change of use in a property. And if you think about it, what's the difference between a short-term let and a long-term let? If you've got 2 bedrooms and 4 people staying in a flat, whether it's short term or long term, like it's much the same. So it's all about sort of, I suppose, trying to disprove the fact that there is a material change of use.
And they were saying that the whole thing in Edinburgh was that obviously they were saying that, you know, pretty much all the flats, like tenement flats and shared closes and that, there was no chance of you getting the licence.
I think that was the initial approach of the council, but obviously there's people that fought against that, and there is now the opportunity to actually put in your application with a certificate of lawfulness for less than 10 years use to actually then make your application and see what happens.
Okay, so that's positive. So hats off to the group that obviously, I think you've been at some of the protests, because I think there was a protest outside Parliament.
There was, yes. I went, it was a nice sunny day, so I went along.
Yeah.
And
do you want to give anybody a name mention, by the way? Because what they've done is they've basically crowdfunded to take this to a court, haven't they?
Yes, there's a few of the petitioners that, excuse me if I miss any, but Ian Muirhead, Craig Douglas, Mark Hughes, I'm sure there's others, but yes, of course. And they also, they were the main petitioners, and Ralph, of course, I shouldn't, he's the main name on the petition as I understand it. But so yes, they basically took this to court, and parts of the licence application in Edinburgh were found to be unlawful, and that is continuing. So there's a second judicial review going to be heard in November. So that's again good news for this. But the whole thing is that people have to be in before the 1st of October to benefit from this. Because I think what most of the local authorities will do is just say they'll use the 1st of October as a line in the sand, and if you're in, then great, but if you're not, then you have to apply as a new entrant to the market.
Let's just break it up then. You know, let's talk about just our main cities in Scotland, Edinburgh and Glasgow, because that's where we've got the experience here. Obviously, if you listen to this and you're within any other local authorities, 32 local authorities, 32?
Yes, yeah.
Obviously, you've got to check out, and each individual council will have its separate thing. But let's just talk about the two major cities. So starting off with Edinburgh then, so when did you fill out the application form? Was it a while back that you did yours? And what did you provide then? In terms of certificate of lawfulness or planning?
The whole thing, it's all of the various certificates, and for me, the certificate of lawfulness is the best way to go, which gives you a planning reference number which you need for the application.
Right, sorry. So see the certificate of lawfulness, can you just describe in essence what, basic, what is that?
Well, a certificate of lawfulness, or a call, is effectively a piece of paper that is stating that you do not need planning. So
this comes from the planning authorities?
Yes.
Applied for through the government e-portal? That's
right. Now, the main difference, I think the main benefit is that if you apply for planning permission, which is likely to be rejected, then you go to appeal with the council as well. Whereas if you go for the certificate of lawfulness, when you go to appeal, you go to the Department of Planning Environment Agency. So it's looked at by a different body. And the main thing about that is the process is a lot longer, so it allows people to continue to trade while their application is being looked at. Okay,
and if I'm sitting here listening to this podcast and it's Friday what would that be, the 29th or something like that? And there's 2 days
there's a bit of time for Edinburgh.
Yeah.
The good news is that there was a bit of a fundamental change in Glasgow. Their portal the process was a little bit out of step with the regulation. And in Glasgow, they changed it around to allow people to just make an application. So in Glasgow, it's very simple. You apply, and then you'll have your application in, and the council will then come to you and tell you whether they think you need planning or not. Mm. And that's the time that you would then go for
what's required for the application, just even if we break it down and say just Glasgow, what kind of information was required, and how much did it cost?
Well, Glasgow's fairly simple. It's literally just a floor plan that you need, right, and and answer a few questions, and then there's a little form saying why you don't think your property needs planning permission. And then that's you've got your application in, you can continue to trade, and it's going to be about 3 months to go through these. So I would urge anyone in Glasgow just to get your application in. And there's a lot of people in Glasgow who thought the game was up for them.
Yeah.
So if you're in Glasgow, do it, and do it quickly, and it's a reasonable price as well.
And you can park the whole planning certificate of lawfulness kind of to the side until you get a response from them. And then obviously you need to deal with that as and when it comes up. Yeah, but at least you've got your...
The great news is you can continue to trade, and that's for tenements and normal houses as well.
Shared access clauses.
A lot of people who thought I've got no chance, now they have a chance, and
and that's just happened in the last few days with Glasgow taking that. It's not well publicised.
No, you're right. It was only maybe Tuesday or Wednesday of last week that they changed the portal.
It was actually you that broke the news to me, because I was like,
because they lobbied it in Edinburgh.
Yes, the petitioners were hard at it in actually pointing this out to
the Glasgow City Council decided to take a different approach to it.
Well, they kind of had to, because as it stood, you couldn't actually put an application in because you needed planning or
they probably didn't have any applications, because people.
That's probably the case. Yes,
it takes so long to go through the planning process as well.
Yeah. Well, you didn't need to. Well, I suppose in Glasgow you did. That was the problem. They were saying you need to have a full planning, and that was not the essence of the actual law.
You'd be raging, wouldn't you, if you went through? I know a few people that went through the whole planning process. I know one person, Instagram messaged last night, and I was like, have you heard about this? And he went through the whole process, paid for all the planning, quite considerable fees as well to get all that done. And now, turns out you don't need planning. You'd be raging.
Well, you the likelihood is you will need either planning or the call. You just have time.
Eventually, right? Okay, so that's quite. So for that guy, it's like, well, it's maybe not money wasted because he doesn't need to deal with it further down the line.
Yes, it'll probably come back into play, but it's just not so urgent. Whereas obviously in Edinburgh, it's urgent. You must move now. You must move.
So how do you think the certificate of lawfulness thing will play out then? Do you think that'll be used as the main sort of thing for people to get rather than like full planning then? And like when I had a quick scour on the internet, a certificate of lawfulness was only like going to be granted if you'd been, there was something about 10 years.
10 years, yeah. That's it's an odd thing that they're sort of saying, right, if you've been doing it 10 years, then there is no material change of use, so you can apply for a 10-year plus certificate of lawfulness, but what has been said is that you can apply for a certificate of lawfulness under 10 years. The likelihood is that it will be rejected by the council, but then you are able to appeal.
There's a lot to play out here, isn't there?
There's a heck of a lot still to play out, and I think. But the thing is, you have to be in it to have a
chance.
And what happens if you miss the deadline?
Well, if you miss the deadline, it's literally that you have to be a new applicant, and therefore, if you're a new applicant, you do need planning permission.
But if you miss the deadline, you can't trade. You have to have an application in, don't you?
Yes. So
you shouldn't continue to take Airbnb, Booking.com bookings. And on that point as well, are the portals, like how do you advertise for your property? Do you advertise in any of these?
Well, I think, of course, but I think the point is about enforcement. Now, what I would imagine the councils will be able to do is look at who is advertising on the portals and say they've not got an application in.
It'd be dead easy, wouldn't it, for them if they wanted to allocate like a couple of members of staff to that? That'd be so easy.
It's a very easy, low-hanging fruit way of going for enforcement, and the penalties are there and they're tangible, and it stops.
Can you remember what the penalties are?
Well, I mean they're talking about a fine of up to £2,500, but also being banned from applying for a license for a period of time.
And what's the application cost as well?
Well, the application costs are different to different sizes of property, but in Glasgow it's very reasonable.
Right.
It's in the sort of £200-300 pound mark.
Is that every 3 years?
I'm not sure of the timescales,
How-
but in Edinburgh
So
it's a
I
lot.
think we're trying to.
It's a lot greater.
Yeah, somebody said to me the other day that the application fee for Edinburgh was £1,500. Is that sound right?
Could be, yes.
It's quite a big revenue for the Edinburgh Council.
Well,
because
of course, they're
there
saying
was 12,000 of them.
that they're not going to. If your application is rejected, they're not going to give you the money back as well, which
So they can put the resources into finding them if they generate that income from the application fees.
Yeah.
How did your one play out with the Edinburgh then? What sort of property is it you've got in Edinburgh?
Well, it's a standard shared entry tenement, so it's one of those ones that is likely not to be granted. So obviously the appeal process is quite important.
And then you just need to take that as it comes then and see what they come back with.
Yeah, but the whole point is it allows people then to trade for probably another 6 to 8 months.
And for the Edinburgh one, did you say you got the certificate of lawfulness, or you applied for the certificate of lawfulness?
Yes, the certificate of lawfulness for me is definitely the way to go.
But you've applied for it, or have you had approval?
Well, what you do is you get a reference number,
right,
and that allows you then to put your application in and move forward. Because it doesn't need to be agreed or approved, but to actually get the application, you just need the reference number.
And I've heard that there's something about the dates as well. So if you operated previous to the 1st of October 2022, was that a thing? Whereas you've...
Well, I think in Edinburgh, because a control zone was brought in on, I think, the 5th of September.
Right.
So you had to have been trading in Edinburgh before the 5th of September 2022, whereas elsewhere it's the 1st of October to allow you to go through this process of planning. Otherwise, you are seen as a new operator.
Yeah.
What would be your exit with your Edinburgh one? If, say, for instance, you go through this process and they take 6 to 8 months, you can trade for a further 6 to 8 months. Then, I'm assuming there's appeal process. Is there some point where you'll just say, I'm not fighting anymore, and would you sell the property, or would you put it to a long-term rental?
I think you get to a point where you've exhausted all the appeals, and then you're effectively enforced to stop trading, and that is the point where people would want to decide whether they want to sell or go to long term. Of course, the council want people to go to long term let, but as I say, there's a lot of water to flow under the bridge between now and the end of this whole process.
What are the main arguments that are getting put forward by the group then, that are the protesting and stuff like that? What's the impact of all this then? If the council really do play hardball and do reject a lot of the applications, what's the impact?
They're shooting themselves in the foot, because this is massively related to tourism, and there's so many people that come and use the short-term let sector for a good, cheap way to stay in the city. So it's not all the sort of party flats that people think about. It's normal families, it's normal people coming and staying in the city and spending money on the hospitality and the tourism sites around the city. So there is potential that even come the Edinburgh Festival, there's going to be a total lack of supply of accommodation for performers and tourists. So that's really worrying.
And what do you say to these people that say, well, you're just greedy, profiteering, taking homes out of society, and this is all your fault? There's a shortage of profits for people. There's two different ways to look at it. Of course, does this really solve the affordable housing problem, or is that something that is grown over the last few years? Yes, there may be situations where there is a bit too many short-term lets in small areas, such as the High Street or something,
Royal Mile or something. Yeah.
But that is where tourists want to be, and realistically, is that affordable family housing anyway? You need to sort of be. Is
that where you'd want to live, as a family housing?
Well, exactly. I think they're trying to solve one problem by putting licensing onto another problem, and the two don't marry up, unfortunately.
I just, again, with the Scottish Government, it's this kind of blanket approach, isn't it, that I just don't get, because like you say, there are clearly issues in some places, like in some place in rural Highlands and that, where literally, local people can't get houses because obviously a lot of them are just short term or on Airbnb and stuff like that.
Yeah, that is true. You do hear people saying that they cannot get the staff for the locality because all of the houses are taken up by short-term lets, so that people have nowhere to live and they've got far greater to travel to get to where they're working. So yeah, that is an issue, but I think this particular issue has just been poorly thought through and is sort of trying to crack a walnut with a sledgehammer. And I
often wonder, because I just think about Glasgow, my own city, and I often wonder, like when the government, at national level, like Scottish government, are coming up with these policies, how much do the actual local councils want this enforced on them? Because number one, they probably don't have the resources to kind of police it and stuff like that. I mean, they're already stretched. I think when you look at the actual forms as well, they're pretty, it looks like somebody's just come up the back of a fag packet and all that. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, there's not a lot of joined up thinking, I think, unfortunately. And
do you know what I mean?
In my experience, the actual council workers are extremely helpful and they're trying to do their best.
Aye.
And it's not their fault that the policy is what the policy is. So,
but they're trying to, Glasgow's trying to promote itself as a city. To promote yourself as a city where people want to come from all over the world, you need to have a range of accommodation to offer people, not just hotels. Do you know what I mean? Like you say,
yes,
for families like myself with 3 kids, you know what I mean? Airbnb is going to be an option. It just seems like totally counterproductive, like you've said, in terms of that'll affect the whole tourist industry.
Yeah, it's just a shame. I think the whole point that everyone wanted was just to stop, slow down, have a think, and try and do something properly. Because at the end of the day, people that are running Airbnbs, they don't mind being regulated and they don't mind a licensing scheme, but it just needs to be done proportionately and properly. And this reliance on the sort of planning side has just been ridiculous. Over the top, yes.
How do you think, you hear a lot about people complaining and stuff like that, whether it be party flats, and I know there's always these headlines that you see in the paper about, Airbnb shut down because of party flat and all the rest of it. But if you live in a tenement block in Edinburgh and you've paid, 2-bedroom tenement flat in Edinburgh, 400 grand or something like that for a 2-bedroom or something, a bit out of touch with prices in Edinburgh. But, if you own a home in one of these closes and you've got people coming and going, can you understand those people that have got an issue with those homes that are getting rented out for short term?
Yeah, you have to see it from both sides. And obviously I'm kind of, my foot's firmly in the camp of the short-term letters, but yes, there's massive group of people who are against short-term lets, and they will complain, and they'll game the system as well to put complaints in just to try and spoil the process. So,
and that certificate of lawfulness, is that open to, how planning basically, it has to be like a recorded notice and all the rest of it, and then your neighbours get to find out about it? See, certificate of lawfulness, does that get publicly registered?
By going for the certificate of lawfulness route, you actually avoid neighbour notifications.
Right.
You still, you still have to notify a licence application for 21 days, but there's no neighbour notifications as there would be in planning for the call.
Is the licence application almost mimicked HMO process?
To be honest, a bit of a box ticking exercise. Yeah. So it's just answering the set out question.
Yeah, because obviously legislation says now that to get the licence you need to have all the compliance, gas safety, EICR, smoke alarms, fire.
Which I think we can all agree is
that's a good thing. I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It needed that. It definitely needed that. But the thing is, like you say, it is a box ticking thing. I mean, they're not going to actually ask you. As far as I'm aware, on the application form, they don't have a little box that says upload your gas safety certificate or anything like that. So it is really down to you to organise that and be honest and
everyone
compliant.
has. Well, these are certificates that are kind of put together by professionals. So yes, they are. They're important, but that's fine. Yeah, nobody has a complaint with that.
And if you're making decent money out of it as well, why not? Like if it again, there's a lot of talk about making this. They're kind of targeting the people that are just doing it for a wee bit extra cash on the side and trying to make it a lot more professionalised as well, so that raises that kind of standard of, rather than just somebody having a spare room that they let out, it's more about how they can make it professionalised across the industry, and people have the different procedures and set up, and there's that standard that raises that standard. I'm guessing, over the long term, it could have a positive impact in terms of standard of accommodation.
Yeah, well, I think, to be honest, a lot of short-term let operators take a real pride in the standard of the property, and it's because it's turned over regularly. Long-term tenancies can obviously there can be long periods of time where nothing happens to the property, whereas short-term lets are definitely kept right
and
up
it's
to
reviews,
because
isn't it?
it's reviewed.
It's review driven, so you're ultimately
cleaned very regularly, maintained very well. Yeah.
Even if your internet goes down, somebody's on there slating you, or your TV remote's not working or something like that. I mean, are you quite hands-on? Do you manage your own ones, or do you put it out to management?
I would do it myself, yes.
Do it yourself. So you're getting these calls from guests, and it's pretty hands-on.
Well, you get and you hear a lot of different calls that come in with some pretty minor errors, but just speaking to people and explaining, and usually you find that actually it was sometimes their mistake all along. Right. Anyway,
but their expectations are so much higher than a long-term rental. The standards got to be higher.
Yes, it has, and I think that's a good thing for the for all of what this is all about. So, and it helps with the licensing, etc. So, yeah, I just think it's been done slightly wrongly, and I think that brings on to one final point I'd like to make, is that there is still the opportunity for people who are doing short-term let but thinking, I'm coming to the end of it, I can't do this. There is the rent-to-rent element that people can do, where I'm aware of certain agents that will say, right, we'll apply for the certificate of lawfulness, we'll apply for the license, we'll manage it, and we'll pay you a rent, and we will, take the risk of actually renting it out Airbnb.
And is that something you're kind of looking to pursue?
It's certainly of interest. I think we're really at the death, or in terms of ability to do that sort of thing in Edinburgh, but there's definitely still time. But certainly in Glasgow, I think there's great opportunity, because there should be people now just saying, right, I'm going to get my license application in and just wait and see what happens. And so plenty of time in Glasgow. In Edinburgh, let's get moving. So
this would be the idea where somebody is like really sitting there and thinking, God, I just can't be doing with this. I can't be doing with all this this new legislation, this licensing, or it's just too much. My head's fried. Somebody like yourself would come along, offer a kind of guaranteed rent, take it off your hands, and you do all the work basically. But they would just be getting the price of a long let, the rent equivalent of a long let, or maybe
there might be a little premium on top of what the long-term let would be. But that's, the risk is taken on by the agent who is doing the short-term let. And bear in mind that they will have paid for the certificate of lawfulness and the
I think you could get a few takers there, because what's the options? You either sell the property, stick it back on the long let.
I have a couple of properties that I rent out on rent to rents to companies that do Airbnb, and it's great for me as a landlord or investor that's getting a guaranteed rent. They take care of minor maintenance, I'll take care of major. So the cash flow for me has been brilliant for the last couple of years I've done it, because I don't get the call with the wee if a tenant complains of the shower screen's broken or something, I could take a few days to fix it. A short-term operator has to fix it within the hour or very, very quickly. So they take care of that. The other thing that's probably worth noting now is, because it's a company like, technically it's not tied to the new regulations, but I can only uplift the rent by 3%. So they come back to me and says, this is working really, really well. We'd like to offer you a 10% increase in rent for this year. So they're continuing again.
Yep.
And they said that they're wanting to put us into a contract because now they're going to apply for the licence and the certificate of lawfulness as well. So yeah, I think
it's a good option, but it has to be looked at pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Has to be a win-win for both parties. Yeah.
Well, obviously, I'm a letting agent, so like I'm looking for people to switch their short terms onto long term and give me a bit of business. But I think there'll be a few people at that as well.
I think there'll be a lot. Yeah.
But I haven't actually seen it. To be fair, I've not seen. But again, I just think loads of people have just got their head in the sand.
I think they've got their hand in the sand.
Just don't know what's coming.
Well, I just hope that we can get this out in time for this to resonate with a few people and for a few people to say, do you know what, I still do have an option, but I need to move right now.
Very quick.
What if you've got what if you buy a place, a holiday let or a short-term rental, and you buy it as a new owner? How does that process work out in applying for the licence?
Well, that would be a new application.
But so that would take.
So that takes you into the new application rather than existing. So therefore, you have to actually go through a new application and planning.
Yes, so the certificate of lawfulness is not real for new operators. The certificate of lawfulness is not really going to be.
It's not an option.
That's not an option.
It's not an option.
So literally, if
it's changing the marketplace, it's changing the moving forward for any new investors looking to get involved in this, it really is going to be a lot tougher.
Yeah, you're right. It's it just changes the goalposts for everyone, and I think obviously that's what the council.
Well, that's what they set out. That's what they set out. So, well, maybe again, how much of it is the council? How much of it is the central government?
Let's see what happens with the second judicial review, and let's just see what changes may or may not come about on the back of that. Exactly. If it's held up in the Court of Session.
And is that group having to crowdfund to raise more legal fees into? To continue.
Yeah, that's happening. You know, there are people contributing, and you know, it's going ahead. Mm-hmm. Yes,
a lot of these guys have obviously been in the business a long time. They're like, you know,
sort of livelihood,
sort of big player,
massively their livelihood. Yes, and therefore they're fighting for their livelihood, and they don't, you know, they're not letting it go without a good fight.
God, it's a really interesting time, and you know, we should be. Well, that's the reason we've got you in here today, is because we need to get this out and get this.
We'll put on the show notes as well the link to if it's a GoFundMe page or anything like that, or is it for?
I can find that for you. Yes,
we should. We've also had Fiona on from this was a couple of years ago. I have reached out to her lately to try and get her back on. She has said she would, but it's just trying to get the schedules.
She's very busy. Yes.
Busy lady.
Can imagine now.
We will follow up and do more content on that. But thanks very much for joining us today.
My pleasure. And you know, the invitation is there on the back of this. If anyone wants to get in touch with me for some advice, I'm more than happy to give it.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us, Chris. Thank you.
My pleasure.